My salutations to all of you. Welcome back to Gita Odyssey live session. Today is session 17 and we will continue our discussion of the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Just a reminder, this class is based on the book we published, First Step into Bhagavad Gita. So far in this series, we covered an introduction of the Bhagavad Gita, the key foundation required to study the Bhagavad Gita properly. And after that, we reviewed the 9 shlokas of the Gita Dhyanam. And after that, we got into the discussion of chapter 1. As of last week, we covered up to shloka 23. So we will do a quick recap of what we covered so far, and then we will get on to the next set of verses. Today, we propose us to cover shloka 24, 25, 26, and 27. The first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is the problem statement. Essentially, this chapter is introduced in the Bhagavad Gita because the Bhagavad Gita is addressing one of the most fundamental problem related to all the human being. It is not a particular problem you have or I have or a particular person have. It is the most common problem, most foundational problem associated with almost all the human being. That is the problem addressed by the Bhagavad Gita. So what is that problem which is common to all the human being? An exposition of that is chapter 1. And this fundamental problem of a human being is expressed through the context of a civil war happened in ancient India, Mahabharata war. So we have seen the context of Mahabharata, and the Bhagavad Gita opens up with a verse by the blind old king Dhritarashtra asking his honest minister or the charioteer Sanjaya to describe him what is happening in the battlefield of Kurukshetra. So Sanjaya, with his true vision, he started reporting to Dhritarashtra what is happening in that battlefield of Kurukshetra. In that battlefield of Kurukshetra, what Sanjaya found was the leader of the Kaurava forces, Duryodhana, who happens to be the son of Dhritarashtra. He approached the mentor of both armies, Kauravas as well as Pandavas, Dronacharya. Dronacharya told both Kauravas and Pandavas, and he is in the side of Kauravas during the Kurukshetra battle. So he approached Drona and started enumerating the key personalities associated with the Pandava forces and the key personalities associated with the Kaurava forces. And he said, even though the Pandava army is small, but it is going to be hard for us to conquer them. So our trump card is Bhishma. So you all should protect Bhishma at any cost. Seeing this confusion and lack of confidence in the leader of the Kaurava forces, the commander-in-chief of the Kaurava forces, Bhishma, he blew his conch and declared the war. So hearing that, what happened? The Pandava forces also responded, blowing their conches. And at that point of time, we saw that the great hero of the Mahabharata battle, Arjuna, was introduced in the battlefield. Just like a modern director introduces a hero to the scene, Arjuna was introduced to the scene. We saw that a chariot, magnificent chariot with 5 horses coming into the army. And in that chariot, you see Krishna and Arjuna. And both Krishna and Arjuna started blowing their conches. Panchajanyam Rishikesha Devadattam Dhananjaya. There we saw a detailed list of conches. So at that point of time, Arjuna was about to fire. He lifted his bow, the famous bow Gandiva, and ready to fight. So before he started the war, he requested Bhagavan Krishna to place the chariot in the middle of both army so that he can see who are all the people assembled there to fight each other, and who are all the people in Kaurava army he should fight. In this, Krishna takes this chariot of Arjuna and places that in the middle of the Kaurava army. And what exactly is Arjuna is seeing? That is what we are going to see today. So whatever I explained so far is based upon the context of Mahabharata. But Gita has a larger dimension. Just like there is a Mahabharata battle outside, it happened once upon a time in the history. There is always a battle happening within us every day. We saw that as the key aspect of this Mahabharata battle. If you want to understand the Gita properly, we need to see the Mahabharata battle as a subjective battle. There is a battle happening in everyone's mind. What is that battle? One side of the battle you have destructive emotions and adharmic thoughts represented by Kauravas. And the other side of the battle is the dharmic thoughts and the positive emotions. There is a constant war that is happening. And who is going to win this battle is going to take control of our mind and body and ourselves. And what exactly who are, meaning who we are, what exactly is the thoughts and the emotion that governs us is determined by who is going to win in this subjective battle. So this subjective battle is the subject matter of the Bhagavad Gita. What is happening in this subjective battle and how we can retune our mind in such a way that the dharmic thoughts and the positive emotions will have control over our mind, and it is not carried away by the Duryodhanas or the adharmic forces. So this is the symbolic meaning of the Mahabharata battle. So if you relook the shlokas we covered from that subjective angle, the Dhritarashtra is represented by the blind mind. Our mind, even though it is very powerful, it is the leader of our internal resources, but it is typically blind to what is happening within because of the attachment, because of the blind binding attachments. So that is what represented by Dhritarashtra. And if we want to progress in our life, we wanted to make some changes in our life, the first step we need to do is the willingness of the blind mind to understand what is happening within. That is the first step in the spiritual path, and that is the first step in our path to progress. And that is what is indicated by the first sloka of the Bhagavad Gita. The blind mind requires the introspection or the self-analysis in me, which is represented by Sanjaya, to do a self-analysis, to scan my mind and determine what role the prevailing thoughts, emotions, and what is happening in that battle within. So the self-analysis represented by Sanjaya do a closer look into my own mind and reveals the following. And what exactly is the observation of the self-analysis revealed? The self-analysis found that within my own mind, there is a battle about to happen. And what is that happen? One side, you have this dharmic forces, and the other side, these adharmic forces, destructive emotions and adharmic thoughts, and the other side, positive emotions and dharmic thoughts. Usually, the destructive emotions and the adharmic thoughts appears to be large in number, appears to be more powerful, whereas the dharmic forces appears to be low. So the Kaurava army, which had 11 Akshauhini, appears to be large in the battle within, and the Pandava army appears to be small. And at that point of time, Duryodhana, represented by the material passion, the blind liking of everything else in the world, ready to compromise any dharmic values, and that approaches our habit, represented by Drona, and say that, like with me. When the habits is supported by the material passion, what happens? We will be ready to compromise what is to be done. We will be ready to compromise our own progress. Just think about our day-to-day life, right? We all know that a healthy lifestyle is good, needed for us. But what happens when that alarm rings? What is going to happen? We will always compromise. And when we wanted to acquire something, right, You always say that, okay, it is illegitimate, but we're ready to compromise. So this is what is going to happen. So this battle within one side, you have these destructive emotions, negative thoughts, and supported by the habits and supported by the ego represented by Bhishma. And on the other side, you have the life force control, the self control, the disciplines, and all the other virtues you have represented by Pandava forces. So, in the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, you get a beautiful description of that subjective battle. What is happening within? On one side, the destructive emotions, and the other side, the positive dharmic values. So at that point of time, Arjuna and Krishna was introduced. We saw that Arjuna and Krishna, represented by that horse, magnificent forces with the five chariot, it is represented. It is based upon a beautiful theme, beautiful idea described in the Kathopanishad, which is the Ratha Kalpana. So we saw that the human body is like a chariot, and the five horses represents the five senses, and the mind is represents the reins of the chariot, and the intellect guided by the spiritual wisdom represent the charioteer, and the individual represented by the owner of the chariot. So this is the thing. And when the body, the mind, intellect, they don't work together, what is going to happen? The chariot will not reach that final destination. So coming back, Arjuna, who is a representation of the self-control here, he asks Krishna, who is the spiritual wisdom in us, to to place the chariot, or to give me an understanding of what are all the destructive emotions and the negative thoughts that I need to conquer. That is the context we have seen so far. So let's continue with the next set of shlokas. Let's listen to the recordings.
Sanjaya Uvacha Evamukto Hrishikeshaha Gudakeshena Bharata Senayorubhayor Madhye Sthapayitva Radhottamam Bhishmadrona Pramukhatah Sarvesham cha Mahikshitam Uvacha Partha Pashyaitan Samavetan Kuruniti Tatra Pashyat Sthitan Partha Pitrinatha Pitamahan Acharyan Matulan Bhratrin Putran Pautran Sakhim Statha Shvashuran Suhridaschaiva Senayorubhayorapi Tan Samikshya Sakaunteyaha Sarvan Bandhunavasthitan.
This is a beautiful word painting of what happened in that Kurukshetra battle. So first let's try to get the literal meaning of these slokas, and then we will deep dive into the subjective as well as the Mahabharata contextual meaning of the shlokas. So here what happened is, it's like a brilliant tour. Vyasa switches the context to the palace, because in the previous verses the whole description was what is happening in the battlefield. The Duryodhana was talking to Drona, then Bhishma blew the conch, then we saw that Arjuna is coming, then Arjuna is asking Krishna to place the chariot. So at that point of time, Sanjaya is describing what is happening. So Sanjaya says, Eva mukto rishikesham gudakeshena bharata senayor uphayor madhi swapayitva rathottamam. As instructed by Arjuna, based upon the request of Arjuna, eva muktva gudakeshena. So just because, meaning upon Arjuna's request, Rishikesha here represents Krishna. Gudakesha represents Arjuna. So eva mukto Gudakesha, Rishikesha. So upon the request of Gudakesha, Arjuna, Rishikesha, Krishna, what did he do? Senayor Upayor Mati Stapayitwa Rathottamam. So Sanjaya is addressing here the king Dhritarashtra as Bharata. So, O Bharata, or the descendant of the lineage of the great king Bharata, as instructed by Gudhakesha, Arjuna, Rishikesha, Bhagavan Krishna. What did Stapayitva Rathottamam. He placed the chariot where Senayor Upayor Madhye. So the simple meaning of that shloka is, O King Dhritarashtra, upon Arjuna's request, Krishna positioned or stationed the splendid chariot, Rathottamam, the splendid chariot, amidst two armies. That is what Shloka 24 says. And in Shloka 25, what exactly is Arjuna's vision? So what happened? Where exactly he placed? Bhishma Drona Pramukhataha Sarvesham cha Mahichitam Uvacha Partha Pashitam Samavedam Kuruniti. Where exactly he placed the chariot? In front of Bhishma Drona Pramukhataha. Krishna strategically placed the chariot in front of Bhishma and Drona and all the leaders, notable leaders. And then he spoke one word, Uvacha Partha. He spoke one word to Arjuna. What? Samavedam Kurunitim. What is that? Hey Arjuna, here are the people assembled to fight this war. This is brilliant because Krishna didn't place the chariot in front of Duryodhana or Karna or any other enemies of Arjuna. Krishna placed the chariot so that Arjuna will be stress tested, because out of the Kaurava army, the dearest people Arjuna had in the Kaurava army was Bhishma and Drona. And mind you, this is not a battle between two enemies. This is a civil war. Arjuna is not fighting with a Ghazni or a Gori or an invader. Arjuna is fighting with his own people. And out of that, Bhishma and Drona were the most dearest people of Arjuna. So when Krishna placed that chariot in front of them, Krishna knew that this is going to create an emotional overwhelming in Arjuna. And he wanted to address that right there. So that is why he strategically placed the chariot. So for Krishna was completely silent. So for Krishna is completely silent, and he just said only one shloka. What? Just see the Kuru forces in front of me. Then what has happened? So what exactly Arjuna's vision was? Tatra Pashyastidan Partha Pitrunatha Pitamahan Acharyan Matulan Pratran Putran Pautran Sakhim Stada. So Shloka 26 tells us what exactly Arjuna was seeing in that battlefield. He saw in front of him what? Like Tatra Pashyastitan Partha. He saw Arjuna. Partha here means Arjuna. Pitr Natha Pitamahan. People like fathers, people like grandfathers, Acharyan, Matulan, Patran. He saw people like teachers. He saw people like cousins. He saw people like Acharya means teachers. Matulan means uncles. Prata means brothers. Putran, Pautran, Sakhin Sada. Putran means people like your own children. Pautran means grandchildren, your own grandchildren. Sakhi means friends. So in front of Arjuna, the scene was not that great. He saw in that both the armies were assembled there to fight. All relatives, all family members, all the dears and nears. And continuing that on to Shloka 27, Shushiran Suhridas Chaiva Senayorupayoravi. Shushuran Suhrida. So in the previous shloka, we heard Sakhi, the friends. Again, Shushuran means father-in-laws. Suhrid means friends. Senayorupayoravi. In both sides, he saw Senayorupayoravi means in both sides of the army, he saw father-in-laws, he saw son-in-laws, he saw friends, and Tan Tamikshasa Kaunteya Sarvan Benthu Navastita. He said all the relatives standing there, assembled there to fight. Arjuna was completely overwhelmed with this particular sight. This is the literal meaning of the shloka.
Sanjay
Let's continue to explore. So, just summarizing what is happening, upon Arjuna's request, Krishna, the divine charioteer, bring the chariot to stop between the two armies, the no man's land, highlighting the importance of, meaning to understand who are all fighting the war, right? And Krishna strategy, as I explained earlier, Krishna strategically placed this chariot in front of his mentors and loved ones. And this is the only part Krishna spoke in the entire chapter. Arjuna is talking the whole chapter. 48 shlokas are there, and almost all the shlokas were either Sanjaya or Arjuna. So Krishna places the chariot and tell Arjuna, just look at the people here. These are the people assembled to fight here. So Arjuna faces the reality now. And what is happening? There is a conflict within Arjuna. What is that conflict? It is the conflict between heart and duty. And you see a storm of emotions within Arjuna. And this is the moment that defines the Bhagavad Gita. So, one point we all need to understand at this point of time is a lot of people, even the followers of the Gita, think that it is a book that advocates the conflict. We tried to explain this during our introduction, during our foundation sessions. Gita is not a book that advises conflict. Krishna is not asking Arjuna to fight, but Krishna is addressing Arjuna's emotional struggle, right? Arjuna's, not just Arjuna's emotional struggle. Krishna is not even addressing the cause of the Mahabharata battle. Krishna is addressing a larger problem. And what is that larger problem? Every human being is subjected to sorrow. So here we need to take a pause and try to understand a few things. First of all, Gita is often understood by so many people, even the followers of the Gita, as a textbook that advocates conflict. But that's far away from the reality. The fact of the matter is that Gita is not advising anybody to engage in a war. We explained this in our introductory session. Please understand that the context of the Gita is an advice given to a warrior. So that doesn't mean that it is advocating war. But the focus of the Gita is a deep dive into human psyche and helping us to retune our internal mental processes so that we can face any situation. And through the context of the war, the objective of the Gita is to paint the emotional struggle a situation can bring into each of the human being. And this is a universal human dilemma. This Arjuna, you can find an Arjuna in each one of us. Whenever we go and face a situation, what is going to happen? The situational pressure take control over us and creates an emotional imbalance. And this is the fundamental human problem, right? And this is the fundamental human problem addressed by the Bhagavad Gita. And the whole psychology of the Gita is designed based upon this concept of raga dvesha. So let's try to understand this a little bit. So Gita tells the binding attachment and aversions in me. what is going to happen? They creates a problem for me. There is nothing wrong with likes and dislikes. Every human being has their own likes and dislikes. Even Bhagavan Krishna has his own likes and dislikes. He likes yellow. He likes to wear yellow color. His favorite musical instrument is flute, and he has certain ragas that he loves. That doesn't mean that he is blindly attached to it. So, this detached attachment, when we live in the world, we need to have attachment, likes and dislikes on so many things. I like a particular type of music. I like a particular style of dress. I like to visit certain places. That is completely fine as long as they are not binding. I have to love my family. I have to take care of my friend. I love my friends. I love my colleagues. All that is fine. But when that becomes binding attachment, that is a problem. So that the basic fundamental human problem addressed by Bhagavad Gita is saying that this binding attachment and aversions in me, when I live a life with this binding attachment, and when I face a situation, what is going to happen? I cannot accept the outcome if it is a binding attachment. And as a result, it creates an internal conflict in me. And this is where Krishna is trying to address. So please, let's take a pause. And what is addressed by Bhagavad Gita is not a particular problem of Arjuna, happened at a particular period of time. It is that fundamental human problem. What is that fundamental problem? I am subjected to sorrow, I am subjected to suffering, and I am vulnerable. So how do we address this? Because otherwise, what is going to happen if Krishna just helped us to solve one problem in our life? Mind you, the life is going to have full of problems. Even tomorrow, you will have to face more problem. And what Krishna's idea is to retune yourself, fine tune yourself, put a spiritual armor around you so that you can navigate your life freely. So this is the idea. So now, Arjuna is addressed in this shloka as Gutakesha. Gutakesha is an interesting word in Sanskrit. Isha means the Lord or the one who has control. Gutaka means what? It is means sleep. So the one who conquered sleep, it is a name used to refer Arjuna. It shows Arjuna's ability to pursue his goal tirelessly. Sleep represents the laziness. So the one who conquered the sleep, he is a symbol of dedication. He is determined. He can fight, meaning he is determined to achieve his goal at any cost. And what Gita is trying to say is that even such a person who is extremely skilled, who is determined to go after his goals, even he is vulnerable. If he is not fine tuning his mind, even he cannot face the life. He is vulnerable. And that is why Bhagavad Gita is going to give us a spiritual armor to face our life. So this usage of the word Gutakesha, it can be a paradoxical meaning, because one side the word indicates that he is very determined, he is focused, but at the very same time it shows that even Gutakesha is vulnerable. So now let's go to the subjective meaning of the shloka. So Arjuna is represented by the self-control. And here what is happening? Self-control is ready to charge, because in my mind there are so many thoughts and emotions that needs to be controlled. Unhealthy eating, cutting corners, and laziness, material passion, lack of control of the speech, laziness. All these things are thoughts and emotions that needs to be controlled within me. And the self-control is about to have a look. What exactly is the thoughts and emotions I need to control within myself? And when the self-control observes the thoughts and emotions that needs to be controlled, it realizes a hard fact of life. They are so dear to me. When I listen to that alarm in the morning to get up and do my workout, what happens? The sleep and the laziness is more dear to me than getting up and work out. When I go to that queue in a buffet, when I see the unhealthy food, tasty food, on the other side I see the healthy food, what is dear to me? That unhealthy food. When I cut corners, when I have always a conflict between what I needs to do versus what I feel to do, I always try to go after what I feels to do, even though in the longer term, like that, the drinking, the smoking, all these things are example. And what I feel is that these thoughts and emotions and these type of desires, these type of habits, they are part and parcel of my personality. And I find in myself incomplete without these thoughts, habits, and emotions. So we need to recognize that the forces I need to oppose within myself, they put a larger challenge for us because they are dear and near to me. And in fact, we think that they shape our personality and individuality. So this slides explains that vision of the self-control. It needs to control so many things. You can see the smoking, you can see the addiction of drinking, you can see the unhealthy food, and blind attachment to money, the laziness, all these things. These are the items I need to control. But I feel that these habits or thoughts or emotions that is integral to my psyche, and they are the one who makes myself, and eliminating that is going to be very difficult. This is what self-control's vision. So the confusion is some of these habits or the thoughts or these emotions we develop as, meaning we might have got that from the family, say some unhealthy eating habit, some of these real bad habits I might have developed from the influence of my family. Some of them would have been the influence of the culture we are born in. Some of them we would have inherited from the society, and some of them we would have developed by our own misconceptions. So the point is, these negative thoughts and emotions and habits presents themselves as near and dear to me. How can I eliminate them? In fact, Arjuna himself is asking, Nigraha kim karishyati? How can I control these thoughts and emotions in myself? This is the battle within, the challenge of self-control within the battle within. And modern psych, it is interesting to know that the modern psychology addresses the same point. One of the interesting observation in the psychology is the idea of multiple mind or the multi-mind. There is a beautiful book called Multi-Mind. It is by Robert Ornstein. He's a psychologist. He teaches in the University of California Medical Center. And he found that the human mind is not a single entity. It's a collection of multiple small minds. What happens? So we think that, okay, there is goodness in us. But exactly like we have goodness in us, there is negativity in us. There are destructive emotions in us. So this is very interesting to know. The mind is a mixture of good and bad. And what we need to do is, how can I elevate the positive thing, and how can I reduce the impact of that negative thoughts and emotions within me? And I added this beautiful slide from the quoted quotes from various masters, so highlighting the same idea. The first one is from Paramahamsa Yogananda. He tells, change your thoughts, he wish to change your circumstances. Because we alone are responsible for our thoughts, and only we can change them. And when you change our thoughts, what you see is the circumstances gets changes. And Bhagavan Buddha says the same thing. We are shaped by our own thoughts, and we become what we think. And this is re-emphasized again by the great master Swami Vivekananda. He tells, if you think about a disaster, you are going to get it. So he tells, think positively, masterfully, with confidence and faith, and the life becomes more secure. And this is so true. And another person is Helen Keller. One person who inspired me a lot in my life is Helen Keller. She didn't have eyesight, and she was deaf and dumb. What happened? She made a quote, and how positive she was in her outlook. That is amazing. One of the favorite quote I have from her is, "Keep your face to the sunshine, and you cannot see a shadow." This is so true. Yes. And then one more quote from Vivekananda. He tells, "We are what we are we are what our thoughts have made us. So take care of what we think, and the words are secondary." So this is also very important. So this is the summary of the problem of samsara highlighted in the Gita. So Gita tells you have raga, which is the binding attachment, psychological obsession, or that emotional dependency. This is the problem, and that is what is helping me to telling me to cut corners. And as a result, what happens whenever I face a situation, it manifests as shoka literally translated to sorrow, but a larger context, it is the emotional overwhelming, or the emotional overcoming, lack of emotional intelligence. So this binding attachment and the psychological obsession gets into emotional disturbances, and that leads to delusion. This is the fundamental human problem: raga, shoka, and moha. So let's just talk about the quote. Often disguised as nobility, decisions birthed from a weakened mind carry the seeds of peril. That's essentially it is. So now let's pause here and listen to Avanti's insights, and then we will conclude today's session. And next week, we will continue from Shloka 29. Thank you.
From the master speak quotes that were just quoted. Ironically, I'm just amid training a child, a 16-year-old child in India, in Coimbatore, who's going to be competing next week in a competition, in an international public speaking competition in London. And he will have a face-off with kids his age, 16 to 20, across 65 countries. And the topic, the theme for the main speech that they all have to contest on is a Shakespearean quote, which would have also fit very well with the other quotes that Rajesh mentioned here. And Shakespeare says that nothing is good or bad, but our thinking makes it so. So again, it boils down all to thoughts. And that's the speech that we are training our Indian candidate for. And Rajeshji also mentioned Helen Keller. She was not only blind, but she was deaf and mute as well. So it is astounding that a deaf, mute, and blind woman can go on to inspire so many generations till today. Even I am hugely inspired by her. And again, it all comes down to that mental resolve, that making that inner Arjuna win despite all the challenges that we face. Now, one more thing that Rajeshji was stressing upon was the absolute importance of the spiritual armor. Now, whether you do bhajans, kirtans, puja, whatever, Swami Chinmayananda very unequivocally declared that without a daily pill of spirituality, there is no way that you can face the onslaughts of life. I mean, if you just look at that chariot that we have on our slides all the time, Rajesh, if you can put it up. I mean, I just go into meditative state, when I look at that chariot. I mean, just look at the picture itself. If you can just make that the central focus of this for a minute, there's that you can see the whirlwinds coming across around that chariot. You can see Arjuna with his hair all flying. You can see Krishna totally in, holding the reins of that chariot. And it's only with that whole picture coming together under Krishna's strength that that war can be fought and won. I mean, if you just, I think you should take a photo. I will try and send it on the question and answer group. Just that chariot, it's so inspiring. It's so inspiring. This is our life. We don't have to go into the Mahabharata war. This is our daily life. From morning to night, from womb to tomb, something or the other is putting us in this situation. So without that daily pill of spirituality, but I'd like to reiterate here that no matter what other karma and bhakti we do, when jnana comes into the picture, when we start understanding life in its entirety, read the blurb at the back of our book. When we start understanding ourselves and we start understanding the context of the world and we start understanding that supreme reality, which is nothing but ourselves, then life starts making sense, and more importantly, it starts becoming fun. So that is a very important thing, that whether you're in this class or not, make sure that some sort of scriptural, spiritual literature is being imbibed into your head on a daily basis. Spiritual studies and daily introspection are non-negotiable parts of spiritual progress, or even just living a life. Even if you don't want to spiritually progress, just to live your life properly. Now, coming back to the main verses. So I'll just quickly go back to a verse that wasn't covered today, but was covered last week, 23rd. Okay, in 23rd verse, if you remember, Arjuna instructs Krishna that I want to see the evil-minded son of Dhritarashtra and all the others who are trying to please this man. Okay, who are trying to please Duryodhana. It's not a bad thing, he says. We have to look at it in a positive light, that Arjuna is so well equipped to understand at that point that here is this evil force of the Kauravas that are completely destroying all the kingdom and all its people. And he has no question in his mind that whoever stands in that part, whoever stands on that side of the army, has to be destroyed. So his words are so clear. You have to remember this, that at that point, the readiness of Arjuna, at that point, all he is seeing is warriors who are fighting on the opposite side of the army. He's not seen anything else. And that is what has firmed up his resolve to get up and fight this war. Okay, remember that. That's what he has said in verse 23. Now, in verse 24, we've explained Gudakesha, we've explained Rishikesha, Gudakesha, Arjuna, the conqueror of sleep, Rishikesha, Krishna, the controller of all the senses, the ruler of all the senses. There's one more word, Bharata, which Sanjaya addresses to Dhritarashtra, Bharata. I think we've covered this in our previous, but it's worth a reiteration over here. Bharata, when you split it, Bharata. Bha means light, knowledge. Rata means the one who revels in. Now, why are we called Bharatiya? Not just because we are born in Bharat or in India. When you look at it deeply, anybody who is completely anchored in light, which is wisdom, which is knowledge, and performs all of their activities through that stance, they are Bharatiyas, they are Bharatas, they are Bharatis. So why do we say Indians generally are? Because it's in our blood. The maximum number, there have been great philosophers, but this you can prove even statistically. There have been great philosophers, saints, sages across the world. But the maximum production of saints, sages, and wisdom has come from the Indian subcontinent. You can look it up statistically, So because of that, it's almost like it's in our soil, it's in our blood, it's in our DNA. So for us not to be reveling in that light of knowledge, even if we've forgotten, now that we've come back in contact with it, for us not to step back into that knowledge and act from that knowledge, it's blasphemy. I'll use a very strong word. It's blasphemy. And this is what, when Sanjaya addresses Dhritarashtra, though he's an uninvolved witness, you see, constantly he's trying to bring Dhritarashtra back to his conscious, his conscious mind. Constantly, he's like, by telling Dhritarashtra, you are Bharata, you are reveling in knowledge. This, what is right, what is wrong. So please, awaken to that fact. But Dhritarashtra is, we've defined Dhritarashtra as a blind mind. The blind mind will never awaken to something unless the intellect steps in. So that was that. Then again in verse 24, between the two armies, I've already said that. Very, very important to understand between the two armies. If we have said that this Kurukshetra war is being fought within us, please understand that we have the Daivik and Asuric qualities within us. We have the good and the bad within us. So constantly. Why is introspection a non-negotiable practice in spirituality? It's because we have to bring ourselves between these two armies. We have to be able to be so honest, put our hand on our heart and be honest and see, this is the good in me, this is the bad in me. See, it's not easy to correct the good. That's non-negotiable. I mean, we know how hard it is. It's so funny that we can't even correct the bad in us and we go and try and correct the bad in everybody else. That apart, it's not easy. But one thing you have to understand is that the minute the intellect starts watching the bad kind of starts behaving. You try it for yourself and see. If you want me to prove it externally, when a child is misbehaving, okay, really, really misbehaving, you might scream, shout, the child will not, small child, I'm talking about a toddler, whoever's grandmother, mother over here, you know, you watch that child you just sit down quietly and start watching the child. The minute the child knows that it's being watched, the behavior will start transforming, not into the same that you want to see the child sitting there and meditating, but the behavior transforms. That is how the mind is. And this I can say from personal experience also, I can validate this, is that the minute I start paying attention to observing, looking at the bad in me, it starts mellowing down. Then the transformation becomes a bit easier. Still hard, but a bit easier. So between the two armies, bringing ourselves through introspection between the good and bad, so that we start watching the bad and we start feeding the good. We've discussed this in the previous. Good wolf, bad wolf. Who's going to get fatter? Whoever we feed. Okay. Then verse 25, he has brought the chariot right in front of all his loved ones. This is why I wanted to bring in verse 23, because in verse 23, there is no demarcation in Arjuna's mind that amongst those evil-minded sons of Dhritarashtra are also my loved and revered ones who are not evil-minded. At that point, when he's so ready for war, he is just only looking at warriors who are standing on the opposite side of dharma, who are standing on the side of adharma, and he's ready to annihilate all of them. But over here, Krishna, so strategic he is, so strategic, and I'll explain the strategy to you. It is phenomenal for any student of psychology. He could have easily taken the chariot smack in front of Duryodhana, smack in front of Karna, Dushwasana, who's derobed Draupadi. There would have been no question answer. Immediately, Arjuna would have blown his conch and started fighting. No questions asked. But the strategy that Krishna uses to bring Arjuna in front of all the loved ones, why? Because a rope is as strong as its weakest link. Arjuna would have started fighting that war in all fervor if he had come in front of Duryodhana. But God forbid, and not God forbid, it was going to happen anyways. Along the war, when he would have come face to face with Bhishma, he would have come face to face with Dronacharya, he would have come face to face with Kripacharya, his bow would have fallen there without discourse. Because that's his weakness, which he had forgotten. Imagine if he had, so this is what we say, this is what psychology says, that before anything in life, always see what is your weakest point. Make sure you address that. And that is what Krishna's strategy was, to make Arjuna come face to face right with his biggest weakness, make peace with it. The entire 18 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita is for Arjuna to make peace with this. That yes, and then he did face them, right? He did face all of them, his loved ones. But then he was able to fight it. So always before we get on to anything, especially any difficult task, please make sure that you are able to see the pros and the cons, and you are able to see where you might fall weak in this whole endeavor that you're setting for. Address that weakness even before you start, because God forbid you meet that weakness when you start, that entire endeavor goes splash. So brilliant strategy by Krishna, and I salute him for that, because Arjuna would have completely broken down. Mahabharata would have not happened if that weakness was not addressed at the onset. So very pivotal over there. Then, of course, fathers, grandfathers. So in verse 27, 28, very important word. There's a word called bandhu, where he sees his kinsmen, his loved ones, his relations. Again, something that we have to pay attention to. Arjuna is no longer seeing warriors. There was a question asked about dharma some classes ago. This is where dharma comes in. Right now, at this point, and Rajesh very beautifully said in that class that in any instance, if there's a conflict in dharma, you choose the highest dharma. And what is the highest dharma? That involves everybody's good, not just my good. And we'll study this very, very properly when we get into the Bhagavad Gita. But just at the onset to understand that what will be the higher dharma, that which involves everybody's good, including my own. So over here, dharma has come into play where Arjuna's dharma at this point is to be a Kshatriya, to be a leader of this army, to re-establish righteousness, to be there and fight and win this war. It is not an Einstein's job to realize what he has to do, but that word bandhu, that is what reveals to us that his entire focus has become selfish. His entire dharma has dropped from the highest to the lowest. He's not seeing warriors. Before in verse 23, he said, all evil-minded, ready to please them all. Come, let's fight them, let's annihilate. Over here, that bandhu word has changed everything. He has fallen in his dharma. So very, very important to understand that whenever we are faced with any situation where there's a conflict in dharma, pick the higher dharma, and that higher dharma is determined by it involving the good of all. Arjuna's dharma here has to involve everybody's good, re-establishment of righteousness, re-establishment of dharma, justice to Draupadi, justice to Kunti, and of course, last but not the least, prasada that he gets is he and his brothers get to rule the kingdom, which is also a gift, nothing to be renounced. So like this, when we understand all of these verses, personalizing each one of it, then we are able to see how our mind, like Arjuna, also at every instance gets into that emotional breakdown as Arjuna is about to start getting into from verse 28 onwards. It's a sight to lo and behold.